There is like live video up there.
Hello. Can everyone please take their seat and we'll get started? Hello. Hi.
A quick question for the demos: will I be able to connect my laptop, or it should be run from?
Yeah, you can. Oh. I think so. Maybe. Could you send? Maybe you have to send it to the.
I can find a workaround.
Okay. Okay. We'll try. Who?
Can you say no?
Yeah. We can try. Okay, guys, we're gonna get started. All right. So welcome to the Town Hall, Prague edition. Here is the agenda for today. Yesin will run through financials, and then we'll have some really cool demos. We'll take a break, and then we'll do the seating around in the circle thing again, and then we have the Halloween party. So let's get started.
So hi all. Before I start, I just wanted to express that I really love the voting deck. So Graham and Richard did a great job of putting the deck together. Yeah, give them a hand. And also Oscar and the full team for putting the wall of shame items together. They are great. And so one item which get a huge amount. Yeah, sure. So one item which got a huge amount of votes is transparency in finance. And it's awesome that everybody can express that. and I want to deliver on this ask, and in return, finance might be asking the devs to do some stuff for them as well. So beware. So what is finance? We are mainly taking care of two items, and it's basically always people are involved. So we are getting out the salaries to everybody of you, compensation, bounties. That's one, like we're clerks of distributing the finances. And on the other hand, we are also facing off to the legacy world. That involves also legal, regulatory aspects. So whenever somebody who's not necessarily in crypto wants to talk to somebody of status, we are there too, helping with contracts, etc. So on the finance side, it's Danny who helped with putting the finance slides together, and Jason who's doing the payments, and Sonia who joined us with legal. Now to the slides. So maybe to Rajani, you want to present?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I totally forgot. So we actually have two new core contributors who have started with us. So we have Sonia, who's unfortunately unable to be here today. She's in Vegas, so. And then Diana, if you want to stand up, you're here. So make sure everyone says hi. Okay, now you can go.
All right. So the current total burn rate, including compensation, bonuses, expenses, but excluding optional investments, is about 1.3 million Swiss francs per month. So if you're not too familiar with Swiss francs, it's just about the equivalent of a dollar right now. This is a summary, and I will then dive into more details line by line. So the current holdings which Status has is at 240,000 ETH plus about 5 million Swiss francs in fiat. So that's an equivalent at the current exchange rate of 53 million Swiss francs. We do not generate income yet, although we have collected one grant by the Ethereum Foundation which is dedicated to the Nimbus client development. Now, Status is fully committed to crypto, and that's why we have such a large stake in Ether yet. So we only convert ETH to fiat because you're requesting it. You want to be paid in fiat in order to pay your rent and all the expenses which you have. Otherwise, we'll just stay in crypto. The ETH burn is dependent on the to fiat price development, as the compensation is basically fixed to fiat. What that means is if ETH goes up, there's more funding available, longer runway, and if ETH goes down in pricing, it's a bit critical. Now, the primary driver of the expenses is the Status team headcount. The more members which we have, the higher the burn. And you can see that on this first detail slide. So the current burn for compensation is 1,050,000 Swiss francs per month. It didn't, oh, sorry, okay. And so the compensation per Status team member the mean is 108,000 Swiss francs, and the median is 96,000 per year. Yeah, the rate is about 1-to-1. Now, this is relatively high if you compare it probably globally, but just about right for the blockchain space and hiring the best of the best. And you can also see that the mean and the median are relatively close, which means the median is really, there are about half of the people earn less and half of the people earn more. Which means that we probably don't have too excessive high salaries paid, and it's a somewhat fair distribution. And you can also see the distributions per team. We somewhat tried to group that to areas. So this is really just for the purpose of this illustration. Here you can find the sub-teams if you want to find yourself in these pockets. It's very small print, but the message here is really per team, people have about the same salaries. There is not a team which earns like a higher average salary. The current total salaries per year, and that's not what we spent year to date or will be spending during the year, because at the beginning of the year we had 30 people, now we are at 98. But with current salaries for a 1 year's pay is 12.6 million Swiss francs. So that breaks down to a burn of 1,050,000. All right, besides the compensation in fiat, we also pay out S&T quarterly bonuses. And that's only 40,000 per month. How come? Many of these have been fixed as the S&T price was very high at the beginning of the year or throughout the first months, and S&T was at about 70 cents and came down to about 3.5 cents today. We have paid the equivalent of 1.159 million year to date. But the current burn is lower due to that lower rate at the moment. What that also means is like the 18 million S&T which we paid are relatively small to the total S&T circulation on the market, which are billions. So we didn't inflate the total supply really. And we are not planning to do so. So besides the compensation, there are other expenses as well. There's a current burn for projects and events of about 150,000 per month, which is going to sponsoring as well as offsites. And the total spending on these projects is about 1.6 million per year. We have a lot of visibility for that. Year is elapsing, and yeah, that translates to about 150,000. Now, quite good news actually on the out-of-pocket expenses. That's the travel, hotel stay, etc., which you on a monthly basis claim. It's quite low actually. It's 60,000 per month for the full team, and we actually have quite unequal distribution just because one team claims more expenses. That's people ops, because they're paying a lot of the subscriptions on behalf of the other team. Otherwise, that would be also quite equal. So the team is very diligent, and I think we can give ourselves an applause. You're doing really good for that. Then what's been excluded from the 1.3 million burn is a few investments which have been done, as well as grants which we have been giving to the ECF, the Ethereum Community Fund. These are erratic and therefore have been excluded from the figures. Nevertheless, I'd like to give you a bit of transparency on these. So this is the cash withdrawal. Here it's 1 million, 2 million, and then the amount of people which we have. So we have about 98 core contributors, and you can see that the spend is following the number of core contributors with these spikes where we've done where investments have been done. Then to the current holdings which we have. So the crowd sale has returned 300,000 ETH, and the current holdings are at 240,000 plus 5 million in fiat. So how come we just have this low number in fiat? Why don't we hedge more? So this is really the commitment to crypto. We live and love crypto. But that exposes us, obviously, to some risk. And there is a plan on at which level we convert how much to fiat, and that's at 800, above $800 we would convert more. We would hold up to 10 million in fiat. Above $1,000 it would be 20 million, and so on. Now, if Ether further depreciates, cost cutting might become necessary, but we still have about 4 years runway at the current rate, and that gives us time to build in use cases for S&T and to make sure that the token economics are delivered as described in the white paper. And so when we build a token economy around it, we don't have to rely anymore so much on the ETH. So we have quite a lot of S&T still in the treasury, which we then can use. But for now, we don't want that. We don't want to inflate the current circulation at all. So what does finance require? We would like to support the overall team with the planning of the finances, and it would be great if we can brainstorm on what will be developed until when. What is the project roadmap? Are we going to have any income, and at what stage, from whom, by what? Will there be any other funding sources like grants? And it would be great if you can break that down for budgets according to teams or swarms, so that you know how much you can spend to keep on track. So do you have any questions?
What about licenses prices, like some services we use and pay the license price?
So the license prices are quite low. They've been included in various, which was at 250,000 spent per year, as well as in the expenses which the people ops have. So that's not making a large change on the overall expenses.
I can do it.
Is there any plan for changing or keeping the same velocity of hiring new people? Do we plan to keep growing at the rate we are, or to slow it down, or accelerate it?
So these haven't. Oh, okay. So I think there was a slide in the annex, which is how many open positions which we currently have. There are about 25 open positions, and so unlikely that we are going to fill these. Will be very Nabil. So that will be. Yeah.
So we have about 13 open positions up, but we've been discussing like evergreen hiring, which is the sense of there are some roles we just want to keep on hiring for forever. And the truth is, I've got a call, sorry. But the truth is, like, we actually can't fill those positions quick enough. That's probably a candidate. So I mean, at current rate, because we're trying many different methods of assessment, those 13 roles, I think it would take us probably 6 months even to get close, and some of those have been open for a long time. And actually part of the discussion, hopefully later, will be more about like who decides if we hire a role, like who decides whether if there's a budget, or who decides when we can add a contributor. So I don't know whether that's a finance decision so much as like a community one.
That's something that drastically affects burn rate. I only ask because it drastically affects burn rate. Like if we stay at the same velocity, then we drain our funds much quicker.
Yeah, so I think the decision is with the whole group, but so not adding to headcount will, so we will keep the runway basically.
Yes, sir?
Yeah,
over here. So I get the commitment to crypto. Obviously, I think we're all committed to crypto, but given that we have this fiat expense, which is salaries, are we not considering any hedging strategies for our very large amount of ETH that we have?
I think that's a discussion to have with the full team.
Okay,
Like, yeah, it's like,
have we had any discussions around employing different hedging strategies for the amount of money we have?
no. No.
Maybe we should.
Yeah.
Yep.
I mean, I know the answer to this question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. The 4-year sort of runway that we have at the moment, that doesn't really include a marketing budget for actually getting mass adoption, right?
That's right, yeah.
Yeah.
Be more explicit on what kind of...
So basically, that would mean I think we want to spend probably about half of the budget of what we have for marketing and user acquisition, which means we effectively have about 2 years, which is still quite a reasonable time to build up the token economics. And I think 2 years is a long time for a startup to have security and certainty to be financed. But of course, there's the volatility of ETH, and so that, you know, there should be a discussion definitely about hedging versus, yeah, how much are we committed to crypto and want to keep it and continue on this path.
Given sort of the commitment of status to crypto, how does that translate into the compensation that co-contributors have in terms of what our targets and the progress is in terms of having compensation in crypto, so both S&T and F, and how we think about it, because I know there was a push to move more people to taking some crypto, but I don't know what the proportions are or what the goals are or what strategies we're going to use to make that happen.
Yeah. So currently about 60% take expenses in crypto. 40% still fully stick to fiat. Whereas when it's coming to the overall compensation, it's just about 10% which are taking crypto, and 80% are insisting on, and 90% are insisting on fiat. So we could really change that and accept more crypto, as well as the bonuses in S&T versus the fixed compensation in fiat is a bit out of proportion, because it's just about 40,000 Swiss francs versus 1.05 million. Any other questions? Anna?
Let's say if we're talking about fiat, do we like convert a lot to other currencies and all these bank transfers, and like maybe we can also look at like creating some entities in some countries, maybe it will save us something. Like, you know, for example, if I'm taking something in dollars, but I'm living in Europe, it's converted to euro each time. And yeah, maybe, for example, we have some entity in Netherlands where we have several people, maybe it can save us expenses, like something like this.
Yeah, so we are very efficient on our financial setup, and with regards to conversions, our partners work really well. And setting up entities would be probably more costly and wouldn't save us. And also the spending for these conversions, etc., is quite low in compared to the figures which I've shown to you. So I have delivered a bit on finances, and you can approach me at any time for questions. Yeah. But now comes a bit my ask, and in order that we can, from a finance perspective, better do our job, and we'd love to do that directly out of status. Security is a concern, and then some features which would be very helpful. And so I'm putting 2 pledges out there, 2 bounties. Like the most used password is, you know, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So I'm pledging 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Therefore 123,456 S&T for the person who, or for the team who manages to implement like a 2-factor authentication in the status app. It can be the hardware wallet, but there could be something competing. And then it would be great for salaries, or it's like a subscription, like it's a monthly appreciation for the work which is being done. And so a way to have subscription within status can be used for other purposes as well. And that's repetitive. That's like 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1. So I'm pledging 111,111 S&T to solve subscription in status. Thank you.
Can you explain subscription? It wasn't clear what kind of subscription you meant.
So the way it should work is that salaries can be paid, and at the moment it's highly manual, right? Every month that has to be entered, checked, and so on. But a subscription is like, I want to continue to work with to receive a service and pay monthly, or it could be weekly, and I just have to enter it once, and then I maybe have to approve it once in a while, but it just is more or less automatically paid. I don't.
So there is an ERC 1337 that is doing subscriptions. In fact, there's little badges at the Crypto Life thing that have it on there. Do you want it?
So then it's an extension of applying that. Basically.
Yeah, I mean, like implement the ERCs. So there's ERC 1337 that does subscriptions, and you know the Gitcoin guys are sort of shilling that at the Crypto Life thing. There's like badges there, literally with the number on it. So,
okay, if they push that as an extension to status, they'll get the bounty.
Yeah, well, I think we should implement it. Same with ERC 681, by the way, and actually get real universal links. Anyway.
Thank you, Chair.
I think we have something like that currently. I mean, we have a script that will scrape all of the status wallet addresses and payouts in automated fashion.
So, of course, it needs to be user-friendly as well. I mean, if it's... there's an idea as well. There's an idea there. I'm a finance guy, not a dev. So, all right. What I do, after this, I'll write it on Discuss, and I explain exactly what I think about.
Yeah, we did have Kudos bot, so that's kind of like that, in the sense that it's automated. But you're talking basically about recurring payments.
Yeah, and this is about you. So it needs to be secure that the salaries or compensation doesn't go to no man's land. But it's going to you, so you should have a massive interest that this is implemented well, and it should be secure on top, because if like the 123 password is hacked, your salaries are gone. All right, thank you.
All right, next we have Julian.
Hello. So this is not only a talk about extension, because, well, I have a personal overdoses of extension, so, and some of you might also. So it's more, it's a little bit more global than just extension, and how we can move past what extension is providing and move past web and Web3. Okay, so I will have a hard time to trigger this video, I guess, but not really important because it was not so nice anyway. Yeah, well, never mind. So, the current state of extension, currently we only can extend chat commands. So that's fairly restricted in terms of what external developers can do, but still fairly powerful, I would say. And right now we are still at the stage where we want to have concrete use cases and people actually using it to really understand how powerful it is and what eventually we would want to do next. But yeah, essentially you can interact with smart contracts with any kind, well, with IPFS. And it's really optimized. The development model is really simple, like just one click to publish it, and you directly have access to those features inside your chat, and with a really great user interface. So we try to really get an interesting feedback from the hackathon around extensions. So I spent quite a lot of time trying to help people actually create extension, which was a challenge. So I would say between 5 and 10 teams, I think, built or tried to build extension. And yeah, so like some associated ideas, like split the bill, which is some kind of typical chat application where you can, in a group chat, you can make sure that people will pay the right amount of invoices. Okay, well, I'm done. Thank you. Who wants to ruin my presentation? So, is that me, actually? Am I clicking on that thing? I guess that was me. Yeah, so some other stuff that people were trying to do during the hackathon, so implementing a Giphy support, or actually hacking status directly to get camera support to extensions, so that kind of thing. So some people were actually really interested and proactive and tried to really push things to make sure that you could do like really nice stuff in extension. So yeah, one very positive thing for me and for Status, I guess, is that we had a lot of very interesting positive feedback, and people are really interested and willing to do things. It's just not super easy right now because we are lacking maybe internal dogfooding, documentation, and features probably. And we got a lot of suggestions, and people kind of frustrated too. But I guess that means they were really interested in actually doing things. So yeah, what we want to do next, very, very shortly, is improve documentation, creating some video to make sure people actually can really easily create extensions. And then meet developers, more developers, like what we did for the hackathon, but just more times. And improve on that iteratively. Next step, make it more robust, improve the playground, which is kind of the developer environment we have, which is related to simplifying a lot of things and making sure that it's really straightforward to create and publish and make extension available. Also, we want to push partnerships, so external DApp, like real DApp team that are doing like real stuff, not only hackathon, and make sure that they want to create extension. So right now we are working with MakerDAO and Kyber. And so yeah, we will just make sure that they will have extension and that we can provide them whatever feature they need. And yeah, something I want to do like in the next few weeks is some internal dogfooding, so that core team member actually create extensions and yeah, just get feedback from this and trying to understand what we can improve again. But that's kind of like the first step of the vision here, because what I think we want to do as an organization is to actually move and fix the current state of Web3, because, well, DApp don't really work, you know, as most of us probably agree with. So how do we fix Web3? So Web3, yeah, as you can guess, is based on web. So this is Tim Berners-Lee, Young. So, well, Web3, yeah, you just inherit the whole complexity of the web. And I would argue that because we are rebuilding a lot of things, starting with protocols, why doesn't make that much sense to actually build on top of web? We can as well rebuild also whatever the web is providing us. And extensions is one first step in that direction. So yeah, why the web is wrong? Well, it's not decentralized. it's not adapted to mobile. I mean, originally it was not about creating an application, but just sharing documents. So that currently what you can do is kind of some hacks around the initial web model. And one very important point is related to data, who owns your data, which is very relevant to decentralization. Because your data in the web model are owned by like centralized corporation, and that's how they lock you inside their own application. So I guess that's like almost like one of the very important things we can solve with decentralization. So that should be part of what we should focus on, in my opinion. So how do we escape those data silos? So the most important idea is we want to decorrelate data from how we interact with this data, which in the web, in a traditional web model, is not obvious. Both usually are tied. So we want to actually have data as a first-class citizen. Data should be that one thing that users own and that then are consumed by higher level concepts. So that's kind of three concepts we can manipulate to try to solve this issue. So views is how you can surface and see those data. Queries is how you can generically get access to those data. So both are kind of addressed by extension. So the last point is personal data store. How do you keep track of your own information secured, and how you can make sure that you only delegate and allow access to this data, not the other way around. The information you have in Facebook, Facebook gives you access to your information, which is kind of backward. And yeah, web, I mean, so this is a web, I guess, so it's not really a good metaphor for decentralization. No? It's like the most centralized thing ever. Yeah, so personal data store. We already have actually a good number of primitives to help us with that, like mainly IPFS and relevant decentralized storage layers. So that's almost like, yeah, that's something that we should leverage and then build on top of that. So then user will own their information and will keep them encrypted in those decentralized layers. And it's then up to user to decide who you want to grant access to your information or eventually revoke. But it should always be your responsibility to decide who can access your information as a user. So I should be able to flip a switch off and then Facebook doesn't have access to my data anymore. But I still have it. Because currently you can export information from Facebook, but probably you cannot do anything with it because it will be like gigabytes of like internal format of stuff. No. So it's not realistic to consume that. And we also want a way to abstract application. So if I have an account in status, I want this account to be usable in another application. I don't want to have like an account in status, an account, and so on. So which means we need a way to have some semantic applicated to this information. It has to be understandable by other applications. So this way there is no lockdown. And user can just move away, use a different application, and still you still have your information, it's still there. So yeah, I think that's kind of very important brick and layer that we eventually, as an organization, should focus on at some point. And then, like maybe another next step is once you have all this data available and digestible, and because there is some semantic, you can have programs actually manipulate that. So we can also provide like an alternative to the current search model. So maybe more based on asynchronous peer-to-peer behavior, like something we used to have discovery, but maybe like pushing it again more. and then you would, as a user, like from your peers, get things based on your personal interests, just because those information are available and there. So, well, yeah, that's really for the future. Yeah, so this is not entirely related, but I feel like we should, in general, just push more like disruptive ideas and try to escape this cycle of iterative, like just trying to improve what we have, but always staying kind of in place, like redesigning stuff. And at some point, we need to have some way to just agree that we kind of implemented some feature right, and then move to something else, and then having more interesting, disruptive ideas that we can try, and not just like improve our current chat, but do like next step, like next stage. What is after chat? Oops. Thank you.
Hi everyone. So I have 5 minutes, right? Yeah. Where is the clicker? All right, so I'm going to present the tool I've been working lately. It's actually not really whisper analysis tool. It's like more P2P messaging analysis tool. And so for like to sync everyone and be on the same page, status is completely basing its communication, the chat, everything, not everything, the chat, on the protocol called Whisper. It's a protocol developed originally by Ethereum Foundation, but currently we are only probably major users of it, so we kind of taking the development of it, or maybe change into something else. And the problem with this and with any P2P technology is it's really hard to understand. Even people who working deeply into networking software, they have so much biases around about centralized nature of networking software that they have very poor intuition on how peer-to-peer software works. And there is a reason for that. You don't have, as in centralized software, you don't have the single point of collecting data. So it's really, really hard to reason about performance, how it scales, how it behaves, etc. So people on hackathons, even technical people asking like, hey guys, are you storing messages in blockchain or whatever? And this is also a problem for us, for developers. We need to understand the limits of technology. We need to understand how we can change our network stack configuration and be able to answer the questions like what value of max peers for each node we can set, and how this affects the network, how much traffic this produces. There are a bunch of questions that we don't have easy way to answer. So this is both the problem for us developers and problem for general public, like for users, for educate, like from educational perspective. This is really hard topic to educate on. So my take on this problem was to build the simulation framework that we can plug in the real code, the code that is used in status, describe the network topology, insert the numbers or the values we want, or make the custom version, the patch, etc., and run the simulation and get the numbers. So the idea is kind of simple. You have, first part is defining the network. It could be any standard graph software that generates network. It could be real data pulled from our cluster or from anything else, from papers on network topology. Then you feed this data into the simulation framework. You run the code at any scale you can. Technically, this is one of the limitations. Then you run statistics analysis on it. And then you feed it into visualization and animation tool or whatever. So And visualization part is also important because it should allow people to play with it, like to build intuition, to have some visual mental representation of that. So my first attempt looked like this. I tried to pitch it to some people, but it was just a bunch of command line tools where you need to copy input and output between them and really understand what it does mean. So it didn't really work. And I realized that in order to show it to the maximum people as possible, we should move it to the browser, because currently the web is a kind of platform that allows you to achieve maximum amount of people. So I moved those components in the browser, and the heaviest component, which probably will require to scale up some real clusters, moved to the backend. So now it looks similar to that, and as don't have my laptop connected, I think this link on YouTube should work with a. Who can click this? No, it's okay to click. Who control the mouse? Can you click this, please? And run into full screen. This is actually our cluster as of yesterday. And so you can, there are some presets of networks. This is custom, very simple networks. You can generate it from existing generators or describe in other way. Then you can specify some parameters for layout and graphics. Backend is running on, users can run their own. That's saying running simulation, so this is happening in real time for this network. And then you will see the animation of how Whisper messages is propagates. Yeah, this one. You can replay it, you can analyze it, and in a second I'll show the stats view, which is at the moment very simple because I just started working on this page. Yeah, but the idea that you can play around with this, you can get some intuition, you can explore the data. And I think actually that this tool could be published. Okay, can we switch back to the slides? And this tool can be published online on the site. It's really all the things happening on the browser. So there is no load on our servers, etc. And it could be good educational thing. Like if someone will ask you about how Whisper works or how can I get details, we can just link them to this exploratory tool. And I think this is the best way to learn any technologies, to explore it by yourself, especially for technical people. Right, it's still work in progress. We can easily plug in their simulation for other protocol like PSS or any protocol we read in a paper or developed ourselves, and we can compare against other protocols and collect the data. We can run it multiple times and see how different parameters evolve, and so I think there are many possibilities to use it. Yeah, so basically, if you're interested in joining me and helping developing, especially formulating which data and which statistics we mostly interested in, please reach to me. Yeah, and that's it. Thank you.
Okay, next we have Ricardo and Michael, so you guys can come on up.
Can we have the next slide, please?
Richard, sorry.
Yeah, here we go. Yeah, we need to connect Ricardo. Oh, that's way too early. Can you go to the slide, can I see the slide deck, please? Excuse me while I do this. There was an improper order. This one here. Please. Thank you. Cool. So when we took status off of Medium onto Ghost, one of the things that people complained about is that we didn't have some sort of metric. Everybody loved the clap function. So what we've done is a couple of implementations for the next iteration of status. If we could switch over to the second computer, please. Yeah, nice background screen. Welcome to Ghost. Actually put this on the screen. Okay, here we go. Cool. So now on an individual, there'll be a new theme coming up with Ghost, which is integrated with the design from Andre and the design team with the unified menu, and then we'll have search function and new categories and things. But what we'll see here is on an individual post is that we'll have both clap implementation. Thank you, Jacob, for setting up a database for that, so you can just show your appreciation for a post. And then we'll have black screens for everybody at no extra cost. So send SNT or ETH. And this is what Richard has done. So what we'll be doing is being able to pull from your profile, either your ENS username or your wallet address, and be able to send SNT or ETH. And if you want to run through how that's actually working right now, a live demo. So you'll be either to go using MetaMask, your Web3 provider, Mint, whatever it is, Mist, etc., and choose whether you want to send SNT or Ethereum to an author for an individual post, which is pretty awesome. So that's coming up. And what's interesting about this is that we're looking for use cases for SNT. So the first one that we've had was the ENS domain registration. That's pretty cool. This will be another SNT implementation. And then we have the voting DApp as well. So this is part of us building the economy for our own token. The way that we're looking to build this out is when we do localizations and blogs, content for other languages, this is a way that we can directly, using the subscription and automated payments, to pay people for localizing our content. And then we can basically integrate that on our docs portal or anywhere that it is that we're doing contributions, and have a very, very frictionless way for us to pay people directly in our own token. That's it? Or do we need to do anything else? This man is a master.
Okay, and then we have Ned and Johnny next. So you guys want to come up?
Together with one mic. I like Michael's radio voice.
Oh yeah, the flicker. We stand here and it goes that way. Oh, that's backwards. Here we go. So, brand. I'm so excited, but also nervous. I think there's been lots of talk about it and a lot of different interpretations. Is like, what is this? What the hell is that guy doing? And which group is he in? Or what's he gonna do? And so I thought it'd be interesting that some of you probably are really familiar with brands, and also it'd be interesting to just break it down as simply as possible. So I don't want to take up lots of time. I don't want to show you. I want to get right to the point and be almost as clear as finance was my goal about how this could work. So a brand actually is just the perception and how we show the world, right? How we appear to people. And branding is really actively shaping that feeling. And brand design is kind of a group of people, or you kind of have a consensus of all different disciplines of people to be able to work on this idea together, so you have a feeling of everyone, what it feels like for everybody.
Just on that, I mean, there's a kind of a common misconception of what brand is. It's kind of a dirty word, or it can be, you know, associated with big corporate giants, and we just want to dispel that. Like, everyone has a brand, everyone has a personal brand, Status has a brand, whether we like it or not, and we just want to make sure we're putting out what we want into the world.
So, from a brand organizational point of view, I mean, we're not really sure, but to the best of my knowledge, like, I'm thinking about all these different groups of different people that probably want to feel represented in different ways or need different things to express these different narratives. So to begin to think about that, we have our principles, which can be really cool, right? We can always resort to those. We'll probably get a mission statement, which can also help guide these things. And the purpose of this thing is really to be able to explore this language together and think about scalability and, you know, what does an agnostic design framework look like? What does a framework look like for a brand that doesn't feel anything but feels like something? Like, this is also really interesting as a challenge for a brand to be not a brand in a way. So the things we maybe would like to touch on are, you know, some of these things for visual design languages. Is there some consistencies or ideas we can create when we have events, or when we print posters, or communication tools, or the stakeholders? Like, is there some way that everybody feels connected or doesn't want to be connected? And how can we begin to think about a framework for that? And also the future initiatives of things, like how do we keep some consistency but also change things but feel cohesive in some way?
Yeah, I think it's important to note we've grown so much since we've started. You know, we started off as a, well, chat, messenger, and browser, and now there's a hard wallet, there's an incubator program, there's tons of people, and everyone may want to express themselves in a certain way. So that's why we talk about this idea of an agnostic design framework, where we create that common thread across everything we do, but still build brand equity in what we're doing.
So, and why do we do that exactly? Like, we want to find something that people can just simply believe in, right? And we also want to make this emotional movement based on multiple narratives. So I think it's really important that, you know, somebody that might not be a developer, or there's incubator, a different group, we all want to be able to tell a story to people that makes it meaningful to them, and then they can feel like they can express us too to other people. So, and a little bit of like an anatomy, we were thinking about, like, if we have Web3, we have the brand, we have projects, we have products, we have people. Like, we kind of really want to just investigate more in this area. We just want to go in there and like have a look. And judging and coming from these principles, right, you think, okay, there's a design language. Like, what is that design language? And what is the philosophy around those designs? What is the principles around our designs? How do those principles affect our design language? And is there guidelines there? And, you know, the tone of voice document, how do we write when we write something technical? How does it feel? Or an advertisement, or a visual language, right? So different colors, typefaces for different stakeholders, different groups. How do we differentiate and build those things together? And ultimately, we had this kind of like crazy thing before, because I was really in the weeds with a component library, which I really don't have that much about, but they are connected in some ways. But I think, you know, we can find that area together, right? It's not that we're saying we want to stand up here and we want to change everything. It's more like we want to explore this other angle and see what's valuable, and then at some point we can see what works together, and then we just want to have the evidence and think we've tested it.
And I think, you know, how we perceive ourselves and how we communicate ourselves visually. Right now, a lot of people see the app, and that's not what we're talking about. Like Andre, Dennis, and team, they do an insanely good job of designing a beautiful product. What we're talking about is at I guess a bit more of like a framework level from a brand perspective. So when we talk about this work, we're not saying we're going to come in and design the app. It's actually much different than that. So I hope that is clear to people.
So we talked briefly. I mean, we talked a lot to different stakeholders, and you saw these Discuss posts, and there's a lot of this chaos in there, and it's like, well, just simply, what did we get an overall sense of? We got an overall sense of that it doesn't make sense to be dependent specifically on one style sometimes, because that limits that experience, right? So let's explore some other ways that might even fit in with that existing one and see how many different experiences we can have people feel. And some of the things we were also thinking about, like how would we begin to think about that ideology, is we'd like to make it easy. We'd like to think about systems that make it attractive. We want to make things social. We want to do things fast, and we also want to make things scalable. So no matter what kind of skill set you have or what you want to express, there's a way for you to do it with these tools that doesn't limit anybody, and you can feel creative and empowered with these things.
And scalable is really important. The framework that we build needs to enable people in the community to then take what we've created and turn it into whatever they want. We just need to, I guess, let go of our brand, so to speak, and let the people in this room create their own individual brands, let the people in the community who are using the application create their own individual brands. But it's an abstract thing to discuss or to explain, because we want to, once again, provide the framework that connects everything together, but then elicits self-expression in however they feel needed.
So our goal really is, we want to create a framework for design that really reflects the principles and this mission and can continue to build brand equity, right? Brand value. We want to see if we can do that, because I think it's a really difficult job, but I think that would be the goal of what we'd like to try. And we kind of put together a little rough roadmap of what we could start to do by interviewing stakeholders, beginning to identify and define some of these patterns or similarities people have together or don't have, and begin exploring and testing these things, starting to build a kind of a general framework for what this could feel like. And then we can get into integration of things and go to product guys and say, hey, look, we found this really awesome thing. Like, would this be cool? Is this interesting for you? Or, maybe we just find completely synchronicity together through even the components. So, and then think about how we can scale that thing, because I think as soon as we get this done, there's going to be a million other things to think about maintaining this system, and future tools of when people want to design mobile dApps on their mobile, or we're going to do AR or VR. We're going to have to think again about how these tools are used. So it will take a lot of time, and I think people are also wondering, what the hell are you talking about? What does this thing look like? And I mean, some of you are familiar with the Photon design system from Firefox, which is a really awesome example of how there's just this portal online where you can just go and you can just open it up, and it's quite extensive. So I suggest everybody have a look at it, but it's super valuable to find like the tone of voice documents. It's also great for onboarding, because when somebody comes and says, I'm a designer, where do I start? You say, look at this document. Here's the philosophy. And then they can get going. And I would imagine in the future it'd be amazing to just be like, have Embark or Incubator, all these people just start taking this document. Just take it. And then you have your own extensive sets of guidelines. So then we encourage people to just keep building with a tool. And what's next? Yeah, so next week we just want to create a swarm, and then we want to start.
Yeah, so I guess there's a timeline in there, but we want to speak with everyone. Like, we want to speak with the Embark team. What do you guys think? How do you envision your brand being communicated? Ben, Kim, what does Incubate look like? All the teams, the core teams, individual people, and then that's where we're going to start to identify these patterns and common threads across everything. And then try to, figure out what's next. I don't know. It took me a while to figure out what the hell's going on in his head. So I don't know. It's an abstract concept. Do you guys have questions and kind of what we're doing?
So you're going to be putting together something similar to the Photon system? I mean, that last part you showed?
Yeah, ideally, it is a system like this. So, but I think there's more that we could think about in there. Like, we could also think about, apart from that system, it would be really cool to have a bunch of things in there that's like we can take
all the production things of like when we need to print banners, if we can just drag and drop assets to create all these things, like streamline this design process for everybody in a way that we know we have a system to be able to do something different, but it also feels familiar, if you know what I mean. Like we have a process for it. Yeah. So not only
an
for
agnostic version of that.
One question I had is like, if we did have this sort of, was it photon or phonon kind of document, would we be open to making that wiki-esque so people could start modifying that?
Totally, because that was the other cool thing about the photon system, is that it's completely open for the users and community to feedback on the whole time it's being built.
That's super cool.
So it would be awesome for us to be building these tools and the community being like, that shit, get rid of it. And we can be like, well, let's see what they think, right?
To get there though, we need like a really solid base and a framework, so it doesn't just turn into this.
Absolutely, yeah. We definitely need, like, I mean, it was like yesterday we were talking about ripples and making like a strong signal. We need to have a very strong signal to start with. And then as the narrative progresses, these things can evolve. One thing that really captivated me from Ned was when he was talking about how you can create some sort of design language that users can actually take and transform themselves. I don't know if you would like to riff on that a little bit. You don't feel like you're on the spot or anything like that, but catch him otherwise one-on-one, because it's really, really amazing.
Or do we mean like if...
When we first started talking, like you were talking about like, you know, maybe the S logo, like where you just like give these like sort of very primitive concepts, and then people can start playing with them. So like there was, you know, this contrast between private and public. That's a concept that people can integrate with artwork. You could see the status logo changing in one of our community competitions where they put my beard on the S and then nipples on another one, you know? And I think that's really amazing if we can have like a brand that transforms like that, you know, through time.
Yeah, and I think like the more assets and things we create, like the more you're enabling people to play with things. Because when you come to like the hackathons and you see these different groups to come in, like I was also very weary and thinking, well, how are they going to interpret our principles? Like you want to try to also keep value and keep making sure the people that are joining these conversations are thinking a little bit like you are in some ways, and then those interpretations are true, you know? Like it's otherwise people just come in and be like, oh, I'm just going to go in and do my own thing there. But it's nicer that we have these different narratives that we can just start interpreting on our own, like artists or writing.
I just really love the idea of like play, you know?
Yeah, and then we can build this thing and then we can break it. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, it's a security question.
It's all good. I don't know. I kind of see this as the way I picture this, and what you just presented is very similar to what Google did with material design. They created a package that allowed people to easily create usable design applications that they could, you know, load into their application, and they just everything that started creating it kind of went viral, and all applications had a material design-esque type thing. Is that what you're trying to do with this? Is create an easily accessible package for people to use to create things, and then our brand kind of spreads as they do that?
Yeah, and I think it's not just at a product level, right? Because I don't want to make those guys nervous. It's more just like we could find a way that's like when we begin to mold things together, it could be an option, right? We could have one very specific language for our applications, or we could have a way that tweaks it. Like you could imagine that I just want to turn this button and it goes from what we have to something more generic, or there's somewhere to play in there that I think that's what we want, is to be able to enable people in this way, but we also still want to keep some value in these things that these guys have built already. Should we drop the mic?
Yeah, sure. Okay, and last but not least, we have Oscar and Graham. And Michael.
Can we refresh the slides, by the way, because there was some edits like 1 minute ago. So a few minutes ago.
Want to take that one?
Cheers.
You want to run the clicker? I'll do that. Okay.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, he's just
Okay.
No, go backwards, I think. Keep going up, please. No, the other direction. Go upwards. Oh, here we go. Yeah,
60.
wall of shame.
60?
Number 60. Yes. Spusnit. Cool.
All right, cool. So, Wall of Shame, or what is turned into is more of a book of shame, or opportunity, depending on if you're a carrot or sticks kind of person. Thank
you. Actually, I think those. There we go.
What? Okay.
No, that's the voting depth. There we go.
Okay, they're in reverse. They're in the wrong order. No, wait. What?
Yeah, no wonder you're backwards. There we go. That was the first slide, right?
Here we go. Okay, awesome. Cool. So we started with this Wall of Shame thing in Basel, and the idea is essentially that at that time we had sort of some implicit set of principles in the white paper and sort of what Web3 and Ethereum is all about. And what we did in Basel is we sort of made explicit, and then we asked ourselves the questions like, in what way are we falling short of these things, and try to make it very concrete so we could fix it and sort of be more true to ourselves. And you can't see much here, but just to give you an idea, like these sort of blue things are principles, and then certain items correspond to these principles. There's kind of violations of them. And then we had some kind of voting to understand the importance of this. And you can see here that this was sort of the top 10 like a few months ago, and then I guess in the last quarter we sort of started addressing things. And this type of illustration is useful in terms of giving some kind of overview of the current state of things and how important things are. And if you're sort of a core contributor or some of the community, you can help build status by seeing what are the problems that status is having, and just jump in and click and get more context and help sort of solve these issues. And it also makes these types of trade-offs and considerations more explicit. So, for example, openness and security is a conversation that keeps reoccurring in different contexts. And by sort of generalizing it and seeing it as like a genuine trade-off, you can reason about things in a more rigorous way. Right, so last few weeks we've had this principles marathon. And we've gone over each principle in depth and seen lots of great sort of discussion. And from that, we have turned this initial Wall of Shame into more of a book of shame, which we did voting of. And I won't go through these, but it turned out to be almost 90 of them. And they can definitely sort of be more deduped and so on, but it sort of gives some idea of the problems that status is facing and our opportunities. So the voting finished like now, literally? Okay, 1 more hour, but these are the results right now. This is top 10. So this is from maybe, at the end it's like 2.5% of the votes, and at the top it's 4% of the votes. And yeah, I mean, I don't know, should we go through them? I guess you can just read them. I don't know, Michael or Graham, do you want to?
I don't think we necessarily need to go through them at the moment, but I think what's important here is we're looking to sort of establish a process that's also part of the things that Ned's talking about with brand design, our principles and our mission, and we're trying to find a way through governance and how do we do things here in this flat legacy organization that's trying to move into this decentralized DAO. And so what the hope is here is that we can use this ongoing process about identifying how it is that we're not meeting our ideals and turn them into a process with OKRs. And we're going to hopefully be using the voting DApp to do this on a regular basis, and also expand the voting DApp into some way of doing soft consensus amongst teams, among products, and use that potentially in a way to replace the mid-level management function or the project management function, so that somehow with the ongoing votes in these areas combined with the OKRs, we have some sort of record of what it is that we're doing, where it is that we want to go, and then some sort of soft way of doing productivity review, and then tying that eventually into these different systems of compensation, both intrinsic and extrinsic, is the hope.
Yeah, and also encourage people, like what this does is, if we sort of, this community, it sort of makes these things explicit, and this also ties into when we move into DAO and having this sort of request for information or making our problems explicit, and because that allows people to reason about it and sort of attack it according to interest. And I also want to encourage sort of teams and swarms and so on to sort of do this themselves, because this is obviously kind of a global process and it doesn't scale well, but you could imagine each group of people can sort of look at it and sort of, maybe you have like product principles and here are the ways we're falling short, and then making it explicit, opening it up, and then sort of that can work as compensation targets for the community and these kinds of
Yeah,
things.
it can even get a little bit more even granular than that when we start talking about the voting DApp itself and its current iteration, how it is that we can expand that out with our OKRs for the team, some pretty amazing stuff that we're thinking about, that this can be a very, very granular thing that happens on team levels and product levels, not only on the principles levels with the voting DApp. You want to come up and talk about that? Yeah.
I don't have many stats, but the first one...
Advance the slide there, Oscar, right? There's a...
See this one?
Okay,
cool.
All right, break.
But the first one... This is the book. It's the master plan. So 59 accounts voted, which... Oh, awesome.
How many people weren't able to vote? So 3, 4 people, 5, 6 people were unable to vote. Yeah.
Okay.
How many people voted with all of their credits? Okay.
How many people voted with their hardware wallets for like more than the...
Hardware wallet usage? Handful.
Okay, so 59 accounts voted. The OKR for the voting DApp was 50 core contributors to partake in a vote, so hit that.
Yeah.
I mean, we really did stack it. That was as easy as possible. But what's interesting is 300,000 or 340,016 S&T was voted with. And of the S&T that we essentially signed yesterday, that was 31,955. So more, like a ton more S&T was used to vote than we initially gave out, which is a really good sign.
Basically 10 times.
Yeah, I think most of that was Eric's hardware wallet, but thank you for that. Yeah, and thank you just so much for helping us dog food this product before we use the voting DApp for OKRs.
Yeah, again,
just really appreciate it.
Richard, Ricardo, you guys are amazing in the work that you did. I mean, Oscar really drove this
And
with 100 items.
I have to say, Yuge, Machi, I mean, everyone loved that slider. That was amazing. And the amount of work that you two put in was just phenomenal. And Patrick, thank you so much for the UX. There we go.
Yeah, amazing team effort here on the whole thing. Yeah.
Any questions or thoughts before the break? Anna?
I think it would be more fair if you know in advance and prepare for this. Because, for example, me personally could get a ledger with other SNT. So it's something to consider for the next votes, to at least announce it sometime before we start. So sometime before it locked the amount of SNT to vote with.
Yeah, I think that's actually a really, really good point. I got my ear tuned off by Greg Colvin recently. Basically, it doesn't matter why, but it was a matter of access and participation. And there's some people that I know in status who felt left out in terms of formulating the principles, for example. So we need to find out ways that we can try and get as much of the word out there to as many people as possible, so we don't, and as much time in advance as possible to capture everybody. So that'd be really good for us to do.
Yeah, I mean, this was really a bootstrapped driven sort of process and a first iteration. Just let's try this as whatever level it is that we have it and how fast we can.
I mean, absolutely.
Absolutely. I don't want the Greg Colvin equivalent coming to me in 6 months' time and complaining to me again for something 6 months ago. But anyway.
Any other questions? There was back here as well.
I wish I could make a poll, like to create a topic, not to choose.
So, I mean, that's a really interesting point. That functionality of creating a poll was originally in the voting app. And you could do that if I gave you the URL. But for OKR voting, we're actually going to restrict that functionality to a controller address. And the reason we're going to do that is if anyone with S&T could create a poll, we really open it up for essentially spamming, for unknown consequences. And this is tough because in a way it's against our principles of being open. But on the other hand, if we open it up without preparing for it, it's going to get trolled. So looking ahead of what we can do with the voting DApp and making it more open, is we're going to have to work with. I believe the solution is going to be staking. That if you create a poll and it's no one votes on it, you lose your stake. But we need to be really smart in terms of opening this up in an intelligent way because, I mean, governance is tricky. Like, it's got so many unknown unknowns. And the more we open it up, the more difficult it gets, the more we might get bit in the arse. So, yeah, I intend on making that possible.
I'm kind of curious where that fear comes from. I definitely agree that it's probably going to happen, but we don't have any moderation tools of Whisper at all. And I'm surprised that we don't have so many ICO bros coming in and just making Slack what it used to be. Well, no, I mean, actually, I want it to happen so we can get our asses into gear and put in some moderation tools, but yeah.
Another security question.
In terms of openness, why can't we just allow people to make their own polls by teaching them how to do it? Like we're showing that we can do it, and we're going to maybe potentially first control what type of polls we do and who does them, but just make sure we give out enough information on how other people can do the same thing and then let them get spammed. And then we can iterate from there. I mean, it's a way to start and then move into being completely open so that anyone can contribute to what we're making decisions on. But I don't think we're necessarily there right now.
Yeah, you're spot on. So the OKR that we're working on for next quarter is that anyone can create a decentralized poll, essentially, in 10 minutes using a GUI interface. The reason why we did it, I mean, now if we need to create a poll, I have to ping Richard and be like, dude, please deploy another contract and deploy it to IPFS. And the reason for that was really just being as lean as possible. We want to test the concept that we're testing out is, can we make this as understandable and as usable as possible? And we want to figure out that problem first before we expand on functionality and more features. But yeah, so that's definitely on the roadmap to make it far more accessible.
And we can imagine doing things with specific tokens, so per team, just voting tokens as well, so that we can do polling functions. This is a different animal here than other things that can be done with it.
Regarding sort of active participation and time in advance, I 100% agree. I'd be interested to hear suggestions of how to do that better. In this case, we had a sort of principal seminar, and there were lots of opportunities in discuss and so on to add stuff to the wall of shame and sort of voting and so on. But I'm curious how to make that clearer and stronger and sort of give people the time to participate and make it clear. I don't know if anyone's in the thoughts, either now or later, how we can make this very clear that this is when you can add stuff and you should have your hardware vote or whatever. I don't know if anyone's comments now, or we can talk about it after as well.
Just one comment on that. The principles, they're not like set in stone, right? Like they're something that can change. Of course, we don't want to run the risk of making that list too long. But don't feel like, I mean, if you have some problems with it, like let's open up those discussions, and if we don't like find those counterpoints, we can't really assess them well. So don't feel afraid to be contradictory to the sort of groupthink that's actually happening right now.
Yeah, so I mean, systemically, the principles live in HackMD documents on our instance notes.status.im. There's a dialogue that's happening on Discuss, and all of these documents are freely editable. They can be contested. They're a work in progress. They're the current state of where it is that we're at. So if you have any strong opinions about these things, there's literally no borders for you for participating, either from core contributors or people who are from outside of Status, so to speak. This is we're trying to make this as open as possible as we can. I would like to answer some of these problems. Is that this has all happened in a time of fractured communication channels as well. We've gone through incredible changes. We're trying to shift off of Google Docs onto HackMD. We're having these discussions. We're having longer form happening on Discuss. We have the blog. We have our Twitter channels. We're leaving Slack. We're communicating in Status where it's kind of like, oh, does the message appear or not or whatever. So that's also part of what's happened in this process. But partly here with the town hall, it's going to become clear how it is that we can all collaborate together on this moving forward.
So I really enjoyed the principals calls, but it was kind of limited participation, and so the voting is higher participation from everyone here. And I wondered, as well as looking at what we've all said collectively are the top 10 important issues, it would also be worth discussing the bottom 10. So the things that maybe one or two people brought up, but it feels like the rest of the community don't agree with. And yeah, because I think it was easy to add, but we haven't actually looked at what we should remove or what is deprioritized.
I think there will definitely be follow-up posts on Discuss and so on. I think a lot of them were actually on the deliberative one, and probably because they were not very clear, they were a bit too fussy. But yeah, that's a great point, I agree.
Just a cool note, I guess, with like the power of quadratic voting is not one principal didn't receive a vote, which is really interesting. Like that wouldn't have happened if it was one person, one vote, one token, one vote. Just my 5 cents.
Also about improvements, like next stages. I think, the options you have to vote for also dictate like that box you're constrained by. So why not to make it at least like 2 stages? One, anyone can propose any option. Then like top N also get voting what to actually include in the poll, and then make a real poll, for example. Then everyone feels like equal in proposing something. Then interested parties can vote on what they would like to be included and celebrate.
Well, see, I feel like that process has happened. We did the initial principles. They've been open for discussion. We announced the principles seminar to do exactly that. We did live note taking. There was collaborative, addition to those things. The people who didn't participate in that, and we announced that we were going to be doing voting on that. It really feels like that process happened.
Yeah, but you will not do it each time for new poll in a voting app, right? And we are kind of discussing not this first instance, first iteration that of course is mostly to learn from, but like the next things, how that voting app would be useful for any community or any group who would like to use voting.
I think this is a really important topic in terms of governance, because it's something that all of Status, both core contributors but also S&T holders, we want to have fair participation, and getting this right is hard and important. I would suggest that we wrap this up and we'll have post and discuss where people can give more feedback and thoughts on how we can do it better, specifically for the next vote, which will have more impact probably with OKRs, but also just in general. And then we can take a break.
Yeah,
How long?
So if I could suggest, maybe we just go ahead and do a post-mortem like we're starting to do on things. This is our process, and then we'll post a post-mortem for involvement.
Cool. 20 minutes break.
Yeah.
Thank you.